One of the most innovative new features introduced with the Live 12 are the new MIDI tools, generators, and transformers that allow for easy generation and transformation of MIDI ideas directly in Live's MIDI clip editor. Once dropped to the MIDI tools folder within the user library, they should automatically appear in two categories here: generators and transformers. We'll begin by exploring the generators. The first of these is called Metarhythm, and it appears like so. I've already got a clip of 2 bars in length, which will be useful to demonstrate a variety of the features built in to Metarhythm. We will be creating some house music today with a 909 kit to start. And to begin, I will demonstrate the kick pattern. So right now, there are a variety of ways we could create such a pattern. And the Metarhythm includes polyrhythmic, polymetric, and Euclidean algorithms to produce a variety of rhythms in a variety of ways. So first of all, I'm going to click in the MIDI clip and then go back to the device to create what's a new apply cycle. By default, with generate enabled, whenever I make changes in the device, they will appear here. And having enabled generate, this pattern of 16 steps filled with a density of 16 at a velocity of 100 with an accent every 3 steps at 127, with length 100% the length of the step and a 100% probability of playback appears. If I want to make every step 127, I can simply bring the velocity up and or also turn the accents off. If I want kicks less often, then I can bring the density down, and you'll see that kicks are being removed until we land on a pattern of 4 kicks filling every 16 steps, arriving at what is basically our standard techno kick pattern. Now, that is not what this device is for, but simply to illustrate the Euclidean programming available in the steps mode. To begin editing a new drum sound, I must first click in the clip to reset the apply cycle to demonstrate to the device that, hey, I'm trying to work on a different drum sound now. And to do so, I can adjust the note. And yeah, let's go to the toms. And this is a good chance to show the rotate option. And if I rotate by 1 step or 2 steps, we basically stagger this pattern. But I would like to create a much more interesting pattern. So first of all, I will take this pattern of 16 steps and let's try filling it 5 times. So this is the Euclidean algorithm, which takes those 5 steps available within the cycle of 16 and distributes them as evenly as possible. And I like where it's starting. I don't know if I would want to have the rotate at 0. It's okay, but it's kind of competing with the kick there, so I think that rotate of 2 is good. I'll click in the clip to set a new apply cycle, and I'm going to take this same pattern, the same Euclidean pattern, and transpose it up to the tom mid. And I obviously don't want to play this sort of tom chord. I'm going to click the invert button. So this is going to take the inverse of the currently selected pattern, but it's way too busy. I would like every third of those notes in that pattern to play. So this is the pattern masking option here. By default at 1, every single available note will play. If I set it to 2, only every second note in the pattern will play. And here at 3, every third is nice. I can also reduce the velocity of these, and in fact, create some velocity deviation by dragging the deviation range for these down. Nice. I think I also want them to retain that pattern but play less often overall. So I can drag the chance for all these down, and you'll see the black triangle, the telltale black triangle appear. Nice. If I open the chance lane, we can see the chances of those toms are quite lower. Okay, so all of these steps are based on a rate calculated here. Let's look at how that works on a different drum sound. I think I'll click in the clip to set a new apply cycle, and I'll go and select my rims. Okay. And as I begin making changes here, I want to leave that note in place. Let's set a different base rate. If I multiply this by 2, it's now taking 16 steps of eighth notes that are being filled and playing every third of those. So this is not so exciting. If I divide it by 2, we get back to 16th notes. But where it gets really interesting is if, for example, I divide it by 3 again. So we're getting this weird triplet thing at that point, which of course I could simply select a triplet rate from the base rate menu and leave these at 1. But what could be interesting would be to take a quarter note and divide it by 5. Way too busy, so I think I'll leave this where it is and maybe come back to this sort of polyrhythmic programming when time comes to explore some other percussion sounds. And let's just go back to our 16th note and explore some non-16th step patterns. The maximum step length is governed by the length of the current loop divided by the rate. So currently there are only 32 16th notes here. If the rate is at 32nd notes, then I can get to a maximum of 64 steps, for example. But we do not want to be messing about with 32nd notes at this juncture. What I want to explore is taking an odd number cycle. So it's doing the inverse because I left the reverse invert of the pattern from the high toms on. So let me turn that off. So there we go. That's 22 of 23 steps. So I will drop that down to 7. And I might rotate that 1 to get it syncopated. Okay, so some velocity deviation and chance could be good. And let's just go back to our hi-hats here, clicking in the clip to reset the apply cycle. And in this case, let's go up to our hi-hat closed. So I think I just want eighth notes. And I've set it to play every other eighth note, but the chance is low, so I'll put it chance 100. And then I'm going to click this new button, which we've not explored, which is the every other. So I'll play the opposite of every 2. Again, I understand there are perhaps easier ways to create a hi-hat pattern, but I'm simply trying to illustrate what we can do with this tool. If I adjust the length, all the note lengths get much shorter. And yeah, let's do one last thing here, which is to show how we can do a selection-based operation. So in this case, I'm going to take eighth notes and divide them by 5, and I think I want them to play each one. Nice. So I've created this little quintuplet roll here, which I can, of course, just edit the ramp here in the velocity settings. And I think I will also group notes and bring their chance down. So they will be activated or deactivated as a group. Let's keep it techno and add some more rhythms here with a more interesting percussion kit. So in this case, I will, let's leave it at a 1-bar loop. And let's find our bongos. Yeah. And to hear anything, I have to press play, but I can already tell this is not going to be quite so interesting. Let's do a 15-step pattern. And this got maximized to 8 because I've got the rate at eighth notes, but I think I do want some syncopated 16ths. And yeah, let's do an odd number pattern. So the rollover is here, 15 steps in, and the density can be, like so. And I think I want to create some call and response here, perhaps. Nice. It's nice. That's actually sounding good with the velocity deviation. So now clicking here into the apply cycle, I will just drop. Yeah, nice. And invert. And these ones, I think I want the base velocity to be a bit higher with a bit less deviation and a little lower chance of playing. Okay, we can also reverse the cycle of the pattern, but I think I'll go to my cowbell here. Let's go to one of these cowbells and do a septuplet pattern. So I'll take a half note here and divide it by 7 and make sure I've got the right note selected. So it's a completely polymetric, meaning I can have it cycle differently with this multiplier. And one thing I've neglected to show with the mute masking, so that triplet thing, that half notes divided by 6, is fitting a little better. I think a little sloppy, a little loose, but that could be nice. I think I want to add an accent here. So every third one of these is up a bit higher. And to have that make sense, I'll bring the velocity down. And the accent is counted on the actual notes in the clip, not based on some arbitrary pattern length. So I'll click again, and let's go up to our cabasa, maybe. Okay, so now what I want to do is just look at some different playback cycles. And let's go to a cycle of 9 and fill it, 7 times. And again, the inversion is on, so I need to disable that. So here it's playing forward. Let's do 8 steps, filled 5 times. So we can see here, that's the pattern once, here's the pattern twice. If I play it backwards, we get a different rhythmic pattern. So the notes are arranged differently. Because we have 1 bar, and that allows me 16/16 notes, I'll change it one more time to the final pattern, which is the forward and backward. So it's slightly different at the start and at the end. I think the last thing I want to show is how this can work nicely with a nice accent on there and a high chance. And instead of playing every 1, I'm going to play every 5th, but I'm going to invert it. So now the pattern is based on every 5 count. So here's 5, and then, okay. So I think it's time to start adding some acidic bass to our pattern using one of the other generators, and I'll fold to the scale. I will start with Metasketch, which is not unlike the shape tool, but it's contextual to the number of notes in the clip and the grid length. So if I set this to a 2-bar pattern, then I will get 32 of these that I can write in here. Now, I want them to play at a lower octave, so I will drop the floor C0 down as well as the ceiling. So now these notes, which I can draw here, are going to be compressed to this range. I think I'll go back up to C1. And I think I'll stop the kit. Now that's way too busy. So it could be cool to reduce the density, which is going to probabilistically make the pattern that I've written in less busy. This could also be a good opportunity to look at the pattern masking, which you might recognize from the Metarhythm. So now only every other note is playing, and again, I can offset which other note, but it can be cool to have every 3rd note. So these are all written into the C minor scale I've already selected. If I want a busier pattern, I might want to just click the opposite. But because I already have these notes in, so to look at a busy variation on this pattern, I'll duplicate the clip and delete all the notes, and then click this to invert, and it's going to remember this pattern that I've written in here. So now it's playing the opposite notes. So instead of every 3rd note, it's playing the 1st and 2nd, not the 3rd. So this is the exclusion mode, in other words. So there's the 3rd again, same as before. And here's the oh yeah, something interesting going on there. And maybe for this variant, I would raise the ceiling, and we can see those notes go up a bit higher. Now I'll go one more time with Metasketch before moving on to our other more sophisticated melodic and harmonic generation tools. And I think I'll just stop all the bells. It's getting a little bit crazy. And here we go. I will, in this case, set the loop length a bit shorter. So we'll have a 3-beat pattern. And now as I begin to draw notes here, it will adapt to the new pattern length. So we get as many notes as are available in the current loop brace, which is pretty phenomenal. However, it's also remembered this masking pattern. So I'll just set that back to 1. So we're going to hear every one of them. And I can see one of these a little too high. Let's take a listen. Okay, so these are like a bit silly, but okay. Now, of course, I could go back and edit those in the clip. Make them a bit shorter. And if it's too busy, again, there are 2 things I can do. I can reduce the density until I get a non-rhythmic version that I like, or I can say, hey, just give me not every 4th note, but the inverse of that. Ha, it's a little goofy. Let's try the inverse of every 5th. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Nice. Okay, so there are a lot of other ways to transform this idea that we can work on with the transformers, but let's go ahead and explore our other 2 generators. First up, we have Metapath, and this is designed to create a melodic pathway that will over a distance in grid-based steps, in this case 16th notes, a distance of 7/16 notes, it will go up or down by this slope amount starting from this base point. We've got a chance that the distance will randomize each pivot point. We've got a chance that the slope will randomize each pivot point, and we can orient it in a certain direction, above or below. Now, with a shorter clip like this, it's a little bit difficult to see the larger, longer contour of what it can produce. So I'll go to my clip and let's go for a 4-bar loop here in the clip settings and delete all of that. And let's set the density to 100%. So you can see, okay, there's a 25% chance of notes being tied. And we're basically getting this up-down pattern that's a bit steeper, and then finally here it randomized a bit shorter. That distance must have been randomized downward. And we're getting this sort of lyrical path going up and down that we can hear if I trigger the clip. And I'll reduce the density to make it a bit less busy. And every time I change any of these parameters, the entire pattern is regenerated. And we can reduce the floor and ceiling here. And this is where you might want to turn generate off so that you can manually generate with this apply cycle button and then make changes with impunity rather than continuously generating new patterns with every parameter change. So by reducing the density, we get something rather more musical. It doesn't sound quite just like scales going up and down, but I'm going to increase this slope, and you'll be able to see as it traverses a greater range of notes at a shorter distance, enabling generate again to get these changes more often. So now it's jumping up and down quite a bit more rapidly and jumping up and down further due to the slope distance, which we can also invert. Now let's look at what happens when I change the heading. So now it's trending from higher to lower, or I can set it to trend from lower to higher. So it's more likely to end at a higher end of the range. And if I increase the slope, we'll see this a little more pronounced. Okay, so we can randomize the bass note that it uses as sort of the pivot point. We can randomize the slope and have a greater chance that the distance time will be randomized. So let's just go to, 1 bar clip and switch to the Metaflux. And we've got a chance the randomization will happen, a randomization mode with all these different algorithms to choose from, and the number of choices available to us within the selected note range. So I'll start playing this clip, which is empty, and as soon as I adjust this, okay, so what's going on here? We've got a density of 50%, that a Euclidean pattern of 16 steps filled 16 times will be filled 50% between C1 and G#4 100% of the time. The notes will be randomized. If I reduce the randomization, I can set a bass note, which is what non-randomized notes that are still produced as per the density we'll come back to. So let me set the density to 100. So now we're getting all these A2s coming through here. If I set it down to C2, then you can see we have a bunch more C2 than the other randomized notes. So it allows you to set a home base from which the randomized notes will deviate. Luck is a pure random algorithm. I'm going to set it back to 100%. And with the density at 100, I'm going to demonstrate that we can create a Euclidean fill pattern. So here's 11 of the 16 steps filled. And every time I change the choices, it'll be that same rhythmic pattern. By default, it'll be a single voice. So I can change the voices here. If I make it 2 voices, then we get chords, okay? And the beauty of these chords is that they will all be generated with the same length and velocity as the other notes on that step. So unlike the seeds MIDI tool that comes with live, if it happens to create a chord, it's totally just random, the 2 notes overlap. Whereas in this case, not only are the chords being generated on the specific Euclidean pattern I've specified here, now I've got 3 voices, and we can do this up to a maximum of 8 voices, which is maybe something you'd want to spread over a wider range of notes. But similarly, at 3, maybe we want it in a more narrow note range. Okay, so even with this Euclidean pattern of 16 steps filled 9 times, I can also use my note masking. And the note masking is based on the notes that are actually available based on the Euclidean pattern. So now As I increase the choices, this randomization will only occur on those every third step of the Euclidean pattern. And there are only 24 notes between C1 and C3, so that's the maximum number of choices in raw semitones, which will then of course be forced back to the scale and key. I can also widen the range of velocity probability, and each chord will get one velocity assigned to it, which is much more natural to how notes are played. It's very seldom a pianist will play their thumb much harder than a pinky of the same chord. They're generally striking that chord with the same force from the entire hand. Okay, so that's an interesting pattern. I might mess with that. I think I'll try a different Euclidean rhythm here. Nice. And the fills, we could invert and see what else is there. And every time I do this, it randomizes new notes. Of course, we can invert the Euclidean pattern. So let me go back to the full unmasked pattern and invert the Euclidean pattern. And yeah, now we appear to be cooking with gas. So I'm gonna go and create a new clip here and use this opportunity to look at some of the other modes that Metaflux offers. Of course, we can rotate the current pattern and set the play direction of the Euclidean pattern forward, backwards. And the base rate is always defined by the grid. But what I want to do now is actually not worry about chords. I've got some nice chords up here, and maybe it'd be good to rename them as I go. But here, I want to set it down to a single note pattern. And it's still doing that Euclidean 7 fills of 16. So let's just do full 16th notes. And I'm not going to worry about the density. I can always change the density later. But just to hear the different modes here, I'm going to switch to drunk. So this gives us an inebriation control. So this is going to give us a pattern with very little pitch deviation. Okay, so maybe that's not so exciting, or maybe it's just what you're looking for. We can increase the range of the inebriation here. How far do the notes stumble from one another? But let's go to the fluid mode, which instead offers a lyricism. And let's change the range here. So it's going up and down in a way that's a little closer to the way that melodies are more typically and it's based on the motion of quantum particles in a fluid. It's a Brownian algorithm. And the less lyrical I get, the more purely randomized it is. So we've got a few more modes to get through here. The periodic will repeat a cycle of random values. At 100%, it'll always play the same value. So at higher values, it becomes more repetitive in the values it outputs. At lower periodicity, it becomes more random. And let's try the chord again. kind of working for me. Okay. Acyclic means it will take a range of notes before it repeats. So within the 12 notes, it'll randomize all of them before it will so the shorter the cycle, the more repetitive it becomes. So now we're just getting this 2-note pattern. And the exhaust mode will go through all the random values within this length, not necessarily in the same order, and only upon exhausting all those 5 random values will it start regenerating from that same set of 5 random values. And decide is just going to give you a binary choice between the lowest and the highest. And the weight is whether you want it to play the high note more often or the low note more often. So as I switch the weighting, it'll more often be the lower note rather than the higher one. We have our length and velocity controls down here to randomize all of those. Again, the Euclidean here, and the ranges here with this darker gray up above. Now it's nice to have a 2-note pattern, but what if I want a 3-note pattern? Well, that's where the luck chances come in. I can say, create a pattern out of 3 choices. So now those 3 choices are going to be divided across this range of notes. There we go. I think I've landed on something I'm pretty happy with. So let's leave it at that before we switch to our transformers. So in the transform tools, we've got a few more options here. First, I'll show the Euclidifier. This allows me to create a Euclidean mute sequence imposed on existing MIDI notes. So we've got the length of notes in the pattern and the number that will be filled. So the ones that are not filled just get muted. So I've taken an existing MIDI pattern generated with a MIDI tool or perhaps played in, and now I can rotate where those mutes occur. So this is the Euclidifier, and we can, of course, change the direction of this pattern. And let's fill it a little less often. Let's do 8 steps. And the length of steps is note-based. It's not based on the actual counter. It's based on how many notes are in the clip. So it's counting notes, not grid intervals at this point, which makes it perhaps arguably a more unique form of Euclidean calculation. Now this is sounding great to me, but let's try inverting it. And this is just like that plus minus symbol that you may recognize from the MIDI generators we just explored. That's a fun little bouncy jam. Apologies to anyone out there who was expecting the techno I mentioned. This is a little rather more housey. I think I might just have to drop a hand clap in here and look at how we can use the transform on some of our drums. Okay, nice. So Now I've got this drum clip selected, and if I were to do the Euclidifier, it would start counting all the notes here. It would be a little strange, but we can look at the Mutator. The Mutator is going to, again, mute some of the notes, and currently it's just that one clap that's selected. So if I want to make all the notes eligible, I need to select them. And by selecting that key, this mutation is just being applied to this one pitch. We can't hear that tom because I muted them earlier. It's still way too loud. And so this is similar to the Euclidifier, but it's a random mute that's applied. Again, similar to the decide mode of the Metaflux, where the weighting makes it more likely notes will be on or off. So you can control which is more likely, steps to be muted or steps to be on. We also have our familiar, by now, count masking with an offset. And we can invert these as well. Okay, so once again, I think I'll mute all of the toms. And in fact, let's take a look at how we could do that here. I'll set the chance to be 100 and the weight to be 0. And now this is muting every third, now every fourth, every other step, offset it. Every other note, offset. Okay, I'm not loving that so much, but it's doing something. Let's go back to our drift track and see what else we can do with our transformers. So I'm going to duplicate this clip here, and let's start playing it and quickly look at our Fluctuator. So this applies all the same randomization we just looked at with the Metaflux, but it applies these to already existing notes. So as I start adding these choices within this range, it's taking the notes in the clip and randomizing them according to the minimum and maximum range with some velocity deviation and the chance of being randomized or staying closer to the original pattern with the same algorithms available to us. So these are our deviation ranges, our velocity ranges, and our pitch ranges. We can set a chance of velocity randomization here, and the chance of length randomization here as well. So I've just rapidly created a variation based on the same original musical idea. To take that further, let's explore the Inebriator. And the Inebriator is going to allow us to just slightly modulate, slightly randomize the pitch within this range of semitones, randomize the lengths by this amount, the velocities within this amount, and the deviations within this amount. And let me go back to the previous. Yeah, that's working. Let's take a look at what else we can do here. I'll just option drag this to a new clip slot and look at our last few options. I'm saving one of my favorite transformers for last. So here's the Octavator, and we simply have a chance that the octaves of the notes in our clip will be randomized within this floor and ceiling. So that's the maximum octave. And this is the chance that the octave randomization will occur. So let's hear the previous. Pretty similar. And let's do a really extreme version. I'll duplicate this one more time. So it's the same notes, but they're repitched to different octaves. Now this could be really useful in a more gentle way to just have a pattern where you have a few different versions with a few different notes spread across different octaves. Next up, we have a very simple swing utility, which is probabilistic. So at a chance of 100%, we can apply swing at any of these intervals. Being techno with so much 16th note action, I think 16th note makes the most sense. But we can make the swing probabilistic in that the notes that are eligible for 16th note swing will only be swung, in this case, 56% of the time. So that makes it just a little bit more rhythmically interesting. Finally, we have the tilter. And so what the tilter does is it allows me to say, hey, let's make higher notes longer and lower notes shorter. So we can tilt the length in one direction or the other. So now the higher ones are really short or comparatively longer. Those mid ones took some of the length modification because I clicked in the clip to reset the apply cycle a few times. We can also make higher notes higher velocity and lower notes lower, or vice versa. And it's relative to the current velocity. If I set it to fixed, then we get a wider range of velocities imposed here. We can also make higher notes more likely and lower notes less likely, or vice versa, which again, in a fixed mode might be more apparent. So this is really useful to say, hey, let's just take some of those higher notes and make those ones less likely to play. We've also got a few key range options here. By default, it's basing the highest and lowest value based on the notes present in the clip, but we can set it to a full key range or a manual mode where I specify here in these sliders what the minimum and maximum value should be. But in most cases, auto works nicely, and you might want to explore the relative or fixed mode with the length that's quite a bit more intense. So those less likely higher notes are now much longer. And by just exploring these generators and transformers, we've landed on some pretty fascinating material that I don't know if I would have created any other way. So these are the Manifest Audio MIDI tools. We look forward to hopefully creating more tools as time goes on. But this is a powerful suite of transformers, generators for rhythm and musical ideas of all kinds. I hope you found it inspiring, and we can't wait to hear what you do. For more information and to grab our MIDI tools, please visit manifest.com. Audio.